The journal lay open on the oak desk, its ink still fresh. Maya stared at the Polaroid she'd taped inside, a towering stone archway shrouded in moss, hidden deep within the whispering woods. Local legends called it the Gate of Oakhaven, claiming it opened once every century to a world untouched by time. As a freelance photographer and urban explorer, Maya had treated the stories as mere folklore. That changed the moment her compass needle began spinning erratically near the old forest boundary. Following the strange magnetic hum, she had stumbled directly into the clearing. The archway stood alone, surrounded by towering ancient oaks that seemed to bend inward as if guarding a secret. The air around the stones was noticeably colder, smelling faintly of ozone and crushed pine needles. She took a single photo, framed the stone arch, and waited for the instant print to develop. When the image emerged, something chilled her to the bone. The Polaroid showed a faint, glowing silhouette standing beneath the archway. Someone who hadn't been there when she clicked the shutter. Eager to inspect the ruins further, Maya had stepped closer to the stone base. The ground trembled beneath her boots, and a low, resonant chime echoed through the trees. Frightened, she snapped a second photo of a glowing mushroom near the roots and retreated back to her cabin to study her findings. Now, sitting by her warm mug of tea with her fountain pen in hand, she noticed something impossible. The photo of the archway on her desk had changed. The glowing figure was no longer standing under the arch. It had stepped forward, right to the edge of the frame, holding what looked like an identical journal. Maya reached for her magnifying glass, her hand trembling slightly as she leaned over the desk. Under the lens, the details in the Polaroid became unnervingly sharp. The figure in the photo wasn't a stranger. It wore her own dark green jacket, her camera strap, and her silver ring. The realization hit her like a wave of ice water. The person standing in the stone archway was her. But how could a photograph capture a version of her that had never existed? She flipped back through the handwritten pages of the leather-bound book. She had purchased the antique journal weeks ago at a dusty curio shop in town, empty except for a title handwritten on the first page: Journey in Ancient Forest. As she scanned the lines she had written earlier that afternoon, her heart skipped a beat. Paragraphs she didn't recall drafting were now clearly visible beneath her own handwriting, written in an identical style but with slightly faded ink. The forest remembers what hasn't happened yet. Do not return to the arch after twilight. The warning was clear, yet the compass resting beside her journal began to twitch again. Its brass casing hummed with a low vibration, the needle pointing steadfastly toward the window, directly toward the dark treeline outside her cabin. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in deep shades of violet and crimson. Maya looked at the photo of herself holding the camera. In the reflection of the camera lens within the picture, she could see something monstrous lurking in the trees behind her double. She had to figure out who, or what, was writing in her book before the night swallowed the woods entirely. Determined to find answers, Maya grabbed the small jar of dried purple flowers she'd gathered near the arch, along with her trusty magnifying glass. She placed a single pressed flower on the open page next to the Polaroid of the bioluminescent mushroom. As the room grew darker, the mushroom in the photo began to emit a soft, ethereal golden light, illuminating the desk around it. It wasn't just an illusion of ink and paper. The photograph was actually casting light onto her wooden table. A sudden knock at the cabin door made her jump. Silence followed. When she checked the floor near the entrance, a small, worn key lay on the doormat, wrapped in a scrap of parchment with a single word scribbled on it: remember. Maya locked the door and rushed back to her desk. She picked up her fountain pen to write down the event, but as the nib touched the page, the ink began to spread on its own, forming words without her guidance. The key unlocks the chest beneath the roots. The loop must be broken before the third moonrise. Maya held her breath. The second photo in her journal, the self-portrait where she was smiling with her camera, was fading. Her smile in the picture was disappearing, replaced by a look of sheer terror. The background of her own portrait was shifting from the warm cabin light to the dark, tangled thicket of the forest. The cabin around her suddenly felt frail, as if the reality she knew was slowly being rewritten by the very journal sitting on her desk. The temperature in the cabin plummeted, turning Maya's breath into thick plumes of white vapor. The mug of tea beside her journal froze solid, the ceramic cracking with a sharp snap. Maya backed away from the desk, her eyes locked on the leather-bound book. The pages were turning by themselves, flipping rapidly back and forth as if whipped by an invisible wind. Outside her window, the tree line was no longer still. Long, distorted shadows stretched from the forest toward the cabin walls, moving against the direction of the moonlight. She grabbed her brass compass and the mysterious key. The moment her fingers brushed the key, a flood of memories that weren't hers rushed into her mind. Running through the dark forest, the sound of heavy footsteps behind her, and the frantic realization that she had been trapped in these woods before. She looked down at the open journal one last time. A sketch of a hidden wooden chest buried under the stone arch had appeared across the bottom margin. The handwriting underneath was hurried, jagged, and desperate. You left the key behind last time. You forgot who you were. Look at the compass. Maya flipped the brass compass over. Engraved on the back was a date from 3 days in the future, alongside her own initials. She hadn't bought this compass at an antique store. She had found it in the woods years ago and forgotten its origin. The realization struck her with terrifying clarity. She wasn't investigating a mystery about someone else. She was caught in a temporal loop, and each time she failed to reach the chest, her memory was wiped, leaving only the journal behind to guide her next attempt. Knowing she couldn't stay in the cabin as the reality around her fractured, Maya grabbed her coat, the brass key, and her camera. Stepping out into the crisp night air, the forest seemed alive with whispers. The paths she knew so well had shifted. Trees stood in places they hadn't been hours before, their branches twisting together to form a suffocating canopy that blocked out the stars. Guided only by the golden glow emanating from the bioluminescent mushroom photo she had torn from her journal, Maya marched deep into the thicket. The sound of crunching leaves echoed behind her, matching her every step. Whenever she stopped, the footsteps stopped a second too late. Something was tracking her, keeping just beyond the edge of her vision. Finally, the grand stone archway appeared through the mist. Beneath its base, where the glowing mushrooms grew, the ground was freshly disturbed. Maya dropped to her knees and began digging through the damp earth with her bare hands until her fingers struck cold iron. She pulled out a small, rust-covered metal box featuring a keyhole that matched the key in her pocket. Her hands shook as she inserted the key into the lock. Behind her, the heavy footsteps grew louder, breaking into a full sprint. The air turned freezing cold, and the sound of a distorted voice echoed through the trees, calling her name. She turned the key, feeling the heavy mechanism click open just as a shadow fell over her. Inside the metal chest lay no treasure or magic relic, only a stack of developed Polaroid photographs and an old, ink-stained fountain pen identical to the one on her desk. Maya picked up the top photo. It showed the stone archway glowing with a brilliant, blinding white light, completely clear of any shadows or dangerous figures. On the back of the photo, a single line was written in her own handwriting. Step through to reset the clock, or destroy the book to stay. Maya realized the truth. The portal behind the stone arch was a gateway out of the loop, but using it would wipe her memories once again, sending her back to her desk to restart the entire sequence. The monster pursuing her wasn't a creature of the forest. It was the accumulated echo of her past failed attempts, desperate to stop her from repeating the cycle. She looked back toward the cabin lights visible through the dark trees, then down at the portal beginning to swirl with light within the stone archway. She took the journal from her coat, opened it to the very last blank page, and pulled out her pen. Instead of entering the portal or writing another warning to her future self, Maya struck a match from her pocket and set the corner of the journal ablaze. The leather cover curled and blackened, and as the pages turned to ash, the oppressive cold in the air vanished. The whispers stopped. The spinning needle on her brass compass settled, pointing steadily north. The loop was broken. Maya smiled, holding her camera high, and snapped a final picture of the quiet, peaceful woods. What aspect of the story or the journal's lore would you like to explore next?